The Shroud of Turin has sparked discussion and interest for centuries, but a recent study from August 2024 found something shocking. You might want to stick around right until the end to find out all the details. But before we get to that, make sure you take a second to subscribe so we can make God the biggest channel in the world. Now let's get to it. Scientists from the National Research Council's Institute of Crystallography in Italy have recently studied the Shroud of Turin. For those of you who don't know, the Shroud of Turin is said to be the cloth that our Lord Jesus was buried in. The burial shroud was first seen in public sometime in the 14th century. Critics have long maintained that this is not the cloth that covered Christ after his crucifixion, but rather a medieval fake that is not genuinely from antiquity. According to the Bible, Joseph of Arimathea wraps Jesus in this cloth and places him in a tomb where Jesus is buried and later raised from the dead. The Shroud of Turin has left skeptics in a state of confusion. There's a faint, seemingly unpainted image of a man on the shroud. There appears to be a small amount of blood, but not all of it is blood. What makes it so unusual is that the image of the Shroud of Turin looks like a photographic negative. It shows a man between 5'8" and 6 feet tall, who appears to have been tortured, crowned with thorns, and crucified. The artwork seems to have been made with light rather than paint. Even if the shroud were a 14th century fake, we didn't have photography in the Middle Ages, so how is it possible that something like this exists? Well, here's where things get really interesting. A groundbreaking new study has now revealed information that might fundamentally change our understanding of this mysterious artifact. According to the study, new insights on blood evidence from the Turin shroud consistent with Jesus Christ's tortures. Researchers identified ferritin containing creatinine particles on the shroud. These particles are often generated by muscle contractions. This finding confirms at a microscopic level the very heavy torture suffered by Jesus of the HST, or Holy Shroud of Turin. In addition, it was stated that the double body image of the HST contained numerous blood stains that demonstrate that Jesus was tortured. The report mentioned blood-stained marks on the hands and the feet that are consistent with crucifixion. The body image showed blood stains that were consistent with the pre-crucifixion flagellation. Additionally, the report noted a blood stain on the chest that indicates a post-mortem wound. This wound corresponds to the post-mortem spear wound that Christ received as described in the Bible. Giulio Fanti, an associate professor of mechanical and thermal measurements at the University of Padua's Department of Industrial Engineering, wrote the new study. Fanti has researched and published about the renowned burial cloth since 2004, and has, according to his own website, the Shroud of Turin has been the subject of numerous research projects. But have you ever wondered where the funding for these studies come from? As per the report, a religious entity that wished to remain anonymous provided some funding for these studies. The group gave Fanti the task of analyzing a fabric known as the Padre Pio handkerchief. Two images, one of Jesus Christ and the other of St. Pio of Pietrelcina, are imprinted on this handkerchief. Both are thought to be miraculous. The report states that Fanti and engineer Christian Privatera's initial investigation found an almost transparent substance in between the blood-stained shroud's threads. The report speculated that this substance, given its origin, could be the semi-transparent fluid produced by pulmonary edema. This condition is associated with an excessive buildup of fluid in the lungs. The report also mentioned that other scholars who have analyzed the Shroud of Turin support this idea. The hypothesis relates to what was believed to have happened to Jesus at the time of his crucifixion. The Shroud of Turin, Spain, is the cloth used to cover and cleanse Jesus' face after his crucifixion, according to tradition and scientific research. According to Fanti's analysis of the Shroud of Turin, the man's right eye was more sunken, with a vertical mark over the apparently furrowed eyelid. This suggests that another blow from the scourge to his head may have blinded him. The analysis also verifies the gospel accounts of Jesus' torture, including the flagellation. One can imagine a wound caused by a thorn from the crown placed on Jesus' head as an alternative to the scourge mark on the right eye. State of the report: imagine a 14 by 4 foot piece of cloth with a full-length picture of a man on it, complete with back and front wounds. This picture matches with every detail that the Gospels tell of Jesus' agony during his crucifixion. It vividly brings those tales to life, much like a mysterious old photograph. The Catholic Church has never made an official declaration about the authenticity of the shroud. It says scientific research should make conclusions about its origins and age. For decades, researchers have disputed its reliability, and their findings have produced contradicting conclusions. Is the Shroud of Turin real or fake? Why do so many people believe it to be a medieval fake? Well, here's where things take a mysterious turn. The answer lies in the controversial 1988 carbon dating test, which proved the cloth was from the 12th century. Is that really the complete picture, or did it mark the start of something much more mysterious? Scientists have refuted the assertion, highlighting flaws in the testing method. They also noted that the carbon dating procedure was carried out with a piece of cloth from repairs made to the shroud in the Middle Ages. According to a 2014 investigation by Italian forensic scientists Matteo Barini and Luigi Garlascelli, the blood patterns on the shroud did not match those left by a person who had been crucified. In 2018, the Journal of Forensic Sciences published this investigation. Garlascelli YouTube video of his 2015 experiment. In the video, he rubbed a sponge against a plastic mannequin to observe how the artificial blood flowed and compared the patterns to those found in real people in various positions. A number of specialists and investigators questioned the 2014 study. They argued that the results did not match the precision of earlier investigations. Some of these earlier studies used cadavers of men who died from hemopericardium or blood clots in the heart. This condition is thought to have been the final cause of Jesus' death on the cross. In the 1980s, scientists dated the Shroud of Turin using radiocarbon dating and concluded that it was created during the Middle Ages. Many people concluded that it was not Christ's burial garment because it was a medieval counterfeit instead of an ancient artifact. If anyone knows anything about the shroud, that's what the majority of people are aware of. The Shroud of Turin was a fascinating puzzle with missing pieces for them. Which section of the shroud did they examine? Was anything contaminated? Were the dating results correct? Well, you might want to pay close attention now because things are about to get really shocking. Recently, a new study came to light that seems to be more accurate. The study looked at the flax cellulose's natural aging process in the shroud and converted it to determine how old it was. Using X-rays, scientists examined 8 tiny cloth samples taken from the shroud to learn more about the composition and patterns of the linen. They used this knowledge to reverse engineer the age of the cloth because cellulose degrades with time. Based on the study, the material of the shroud shows qualities with samples that date to the 1st century, specifically from 55 to 74 AD. The scientists also compared the Shroud of Turin with samples of medieval linen from the 13th and 14th centuries, when the 1988 study claimed the shroud was fabricated. But the samples were very different from one another. This indicates that it couldn't have originated in the 13th or 14th centuries, which means it had to be from the 1st century. To put it differently, it must have been from the time when our Lord was crucified. The lead researcher of the study, Dr. Liberato Di Caro, said that fabric samples are usually polluted in some way. This prevents them from being completely removed from the dated specimen. For example, incomplete sample cleaning compromises the reliability of carbon-14 dating. Thus, this is just a much more precise dating technique. Recent scientific studies suggest that the Shroud of Turin is likely the type of shroud that once belonged to Jesus. What is your perspective on the Shroud of Turin, a cloth that is shrouded in mystery and has a picture that defies description? This becomes even more intriguing when you consider the state of technology at the time it was reportedly created. Claiming to be the cloth that covered Christ during his burial, the shroud has a long history. If you told someone about this, they could laugh and say, that's ridiculous. When it originally surfaced in public, it was merely a made-up fake. It's simply superstitions and folklore, nothing more. Imagine, however, presenting them with research that concludes, no, this cloth is ancient and the image on it is photographic negative. How would you interpret that? For some, even pious people, it's mind-boggling and even frightening. It's too crazy to believe in the Shroud of Turin, some people may say. And then there is a miraculous cloth known as the tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe, which has baffled mankind for 5 centuries. This delicate material from a peasant garment should have fallen apart in 30 or 40 years, but it's still in wonderful condition. At the start of the 20th century, anarchists tried to blow it up together with a church, but the fabric survived. Rather, a crucifix carved around it, appearing as though it was safeguarding it. What could be more incredible? Upon closer inspection, scientists discovered that the Telmer's eyes were incredibly realistic, reflecting even the room in which it was on display. It resembled something from a mystery book, but it's true. Even pious people find things like the Shroud of Turin and the tilma of Our Lady of Guadalupe extremely scandalous. They say, no, religion is an abstract concept. It has nothing to do with this piece of clothing or this event that occurred on this day. The Greeks search for wisdom and the Jews look for sin, says a passage from the 1 Corinthians. But we preach the crucified Christ. Greeks and Jews find it foolish or confusing, but for believers, Christ is a symbol of God's power and wisdom. God's weakness is stronger than man's, and God's stupidity is wiser than man. It begins to make sense when you read a study like this and think, wow, this could actually be the miraculous burial shroud of Christ. You might also consider the possibility that the Talmud is a miraculous image that no one else can explain. The most simple and convincing answer is that these might actually be real miracles. You may suddenly conclude, wow, maybe all that the Bible and the church have taught about how God desires to be worshiped and how we should live is true. It's something actual and significant rather than just theoretical concepts for many people. This concept may seem surprising. It's disturbing to consider that religion may be more than just a matter of personal preference and that it has actual tangible solutions. What if there's an authentic truth and a proper way to live? You may need to use your reasoning to embrace faith in revelation and live morally so that you can get a true understanding of God. If you made it all the way to this part in the video, you may qualify for our membership, so you might want to listen closely. It's an exclusive area where we release videos that we cannot show to the public yet. You will get to see everything first and learn about Druid that we cannot reveal anywhere else. If you want to learn more, hit the link in the description in the pinned comment or on our homepage.